Hello, everyone. My name is Adele Taylor. I'm with the New Jersey Garden State Film Festival. And today I have two very special people with me, filmmaker Sarah Galloway and architect David Cummins from the film Wild in the Garden State. So happy you guys are here. Thank you for joining me. You guys
Thanks for having us, Adele.
Of course. Do you want to go ahead and introduce yourselves? Maybe tell us just a little bit about the film.
Well, Wild in the Garden State got started because Dave and I moved to New Jersey 10 years ago, and we started gardening for the first time in our suburban New Jersey home. And we had no experience gardening. I mean, I had a background because I made videos for the American Museum of Natural History, did a lot of ecology, nature videos, and Dave has a background in architecture, so we're big into design. So we knew as we started to garden with no experience that we wanted to garden for wildlife, but we also wanted it to be really beautiful.
Oh, I love that.
What did you want to
I
add?
have a little experience. I watched Green Acres reruns for years when I was growing up. So you probably don't. That probably doesn't relate. Wouldn't relate to that.
My mom did mention it one time, so
Right.
I'm
I'm sorry. I shouldn't have even mentioned
City
it.
people move into the suburbs or
All
the
right.
country.
Get your edit button out. No, I'm kidding. I'm an architect. We lived in New York City. Before we came here, we lived about a block and a half from the High Line, which is a beautiful linear railway that's been converted into totally native plants. And we were just astounded. We would walk there almost every night. We were just astounded by the beauty of natural native plants. These were all native plants, and yet it was wondrously beautiful. And it was beautifully designed. I mean, I couldn't help but notice that as an architect. The benches, the lighting, the pathway, they left railroad artifacts. Anyway, when we came to New Jersey, it was totally obvious to me that we wanted to make this beautiful garden, which we knew would be beautiful because we've seen the plants. But I wanted to make it good for us, so we could see this beautiful design. I'm sorry. And we want to do this also for the neighbors, not just for us. You know, when we came down here, we didn't want to be, those neighbors that have the garden that have the wild garden that looks like a forest, We wanted to be those neighbors, those guys, yeah. So that was our inspiration, the High Line, and I'm being an architect, and she's a designer. Filmmakers are designers, so we wanted it to be beautiful.
Amazing. I just came back from Hawaii, so I have to say that
Wow.
there's nothing beautiful than just going somewhere. And I think you might agree that a lot of people use gardens as their sanctuaries, their place of, whether they're writers or filmmakers, or they just want to go and get some peace and inspiration. So I'm so glad
Right.
you guys weren't those neighbors and you decided to take your passion and turn it into something beautiful.
Yeah.
I love that. So it's kind of already stated. I know you briefly talked about it, but how did you come up with this name in particular? Because being from the Garden State, I was like, oh, wait, what's going on? What's wild? I want to know. How did you come forward to choose that name?
Well, I'm glad you had that reaction because, I think when I was working on the documentary, and the pandemic gave me time to work on the documentary. Like I'd been freelancing and didn't have time, and then pandemic freelance jobs just kind of went away. But when I finally realized, like, oh, I have time to actually do this garden documentary. There's one page where I have like all these various names crossed out, and Wild in the Garden State. It's immediately sexy, right? So I think it's going to help attract an audience, and we're trying to
I
attract
did
a
give her
wide
some
audience.
grief about that name,
Yeah.
I'm not sure she was
And
aware
maybe,
of the other films.
I am aware of, maybe attracting, but hey, I want everybody to learn about the beauty of native plants. So I think a name like that, Wild in the Garden State, that attracts attention it can only be a good thing.
It does. I think it goes hand in hand. Wild, you're talking about gardening. It's definitely a word used in that realm a little bit, but you guys turned into something beautiful. I just love the name. I wanted to know. I'm a Jersey girl, so I was like, what's going on?
Yay! And Jersey too is really important. While in the Garden State, New Jersey, as we say in the documentary, is the most densely populated state in the whole United States. Yeah. And yet we could bring nature into our tiny suburban garden. And even though we're in the densest state in the Union, we could still go out our back doors and go into that beautiful place where you want to relax and commune with nature.
Yes, I love that. Now, speaking of filming, I did a little research and I was on your website and I saw that you actually shot all of this on ordinary smartphones and a GoPro.
I did.
Gotta say, I'm a traveler. Love. I think my GoPro is actually more important to me than my phone when I'm traveling. So what made you choose these tools and go this route to film?
Yeah, this is my smartphone, and I just shot it with it was shot over 10 years. So starting with the iPhone 6, it started really as just me documenting plants because we really had no experience with gardening. So I wanted to document okay, so this is a rhododendron. Let me just tape that so I can remember. I did not know the difference between rhododendron and black-eyed Susan or all the other plant names that we now know and love in our garden. But so I just started documenting, and as you see early in the documentary, I'm with my mom, my English gardening mom, and we're going around, is this a weed? No, that's a plant. No, that's a weed. And so
I had no clue.
I was like, no clue. And so I'm going around okay, this is a weed, this is a plant, although I would say that some things that are considered weeds are actually beneficial wild plants.
We like our weeds now.
So it just really started out note-taking with my smartphone, and then I think 3 years in, so we were working crazy jobs, really super busy, but in 2015 we really started our first garden bed, and when that took off, we had what we call our miracle moment. We planted these native plants and then the monarch came. It was really just an astounding moment for us. I thought, gee, I think I may have a documentary here. And since that's what I do, I'm a documentary filmmaker, I thought, okay, I'm shooting it with my smartphone, but it doesn't look that bad. And, then I use my GoPro that Adele, you were saying you love your GoPro. You're using that in Hawaii. And then I could set up the GoPro in front of the birdhouses, and then with my smartphone, start recording and stop. I could monitor the GoPro so I could have that, because getting bird shots is almost impossible unless you have something like a GoPro that you could it's like having a bird blind. So
actually, the GoPro was her last little documentary. It was all filmed on bikes using a GoPro camera. So anyway. Part of the beauty of her doing the smartphone is that, you can't just pick up a smartphone and be a filmmaker. She has 20 years experience with the American Museum of Natural History, with film crews and behind cameras. We met as musicians, for instance, and people are always saying, oh, what kind, I play guitar pretty decent. And well, what kind of guitar do you have? If I get one of those, will I be a good musician? I said, well, if you're willing to practice for thousands of hours. And it's the same way with her. She can make anything look good with any camera.
Well, thanks, Dave.
Well, I'm just saying, I mean.
Love it. I think you highlighted on something important, and you actually kind of touched on my next question to you.
Okay.
You're taking your passion and you're using it, whether it's for, to build revenue for you or you're just enjoying it. What would you say to the next generation of filmmakers who aren't really sure where to start, whether it's using specific tools such as a smartphone or a GoPro, or just trying to figure out what to do and have their message amplified? What would you say to them as a piece of advice?
I would say if you have something like a smartphone, get started right away. And certainly the barriers to getting started are falling down a little bit. And I'm all about having everybody be a filmmaker. I mean, this is such a media-saturated world right now. And if you understand the tools of filmmaking and getting your story out there, then you're accessing power. Mm-hmm. And certainly with the better lenses on smartphones now, anybody can be a filmmaker now. And there's also cheaper non-linear editing systems out there that don't cost an arm and a leg like Adobe charges each month,
So much.
And so
so
yeah. I would actually, as a second act, I would love to teach filmmaking to kids. So,
And you'd be good at it.
but yeah, no, the barriers are coming down. It's still, but that's definitely something that's interesting to me. Is like learning how to make films and learning how messages come across and how the message can be manipulated or not, how the truth comes through or not, all those types of things. Does that answer your question, Adele?
Yes, no, it does. And I actually am going to kind of switch a little bit and ask David the same question because David, you mentioned you were an architect and you helped out so much with this film. And so for people, maybe even young people who are doing maybe let's just say a regular 9 to 5 job, but it's not really their passion, it's not what they want to do. It seemed like you were able to bridge your passion with something that was work. So how did you go about doing that, or maybe even what advice you have for those who are looking to do that?
Well, I had no idea for the first 25 years that I was going to be a gardener because I was in New York City until the High Line started going up, and then we moved to suburbia. So I didn't know what, my passions were all in music and travel and things like that. I play 3 instruments and that's what I do. Now, I don't know how I bridges into the garden here too. I sit out and play music constantly and people stop and talk to me and ask me questions about the garden. I don't know, in answer to your question, I was an architect not working for a big company. I worked for myself. My whole 25, almost 30 years, and I built kind of what I designed. So I was a registered architect, but I just followed. My passion was to build things and get the joy of and sense of completion. Instead of, I started out in bigger firms, and I would be designing toilet partitions in a hotel in Dubai or something. That's my whole. I never see the project finish. That was it was my end all involvement in that project. I never knew what it was. So I followed my passion out of the architecture office into a private practice, and I got my hands on.
I love that.
I'm still doing that, by the way. In the documentary, you don't see any other people working on the garden. It's all Sarah and I. We both, we love getting our hands dirty.
Yeah, definitely hands-on. I guess that's a message for young people who are interested in filmmaking or gardening or architecture is like, don't be afraid to just get your hands dirty and just start doing it right away. There's nothing better than just getting that experience. And like reading about it isn't going to be the same thing as just doing it. And certainly, certainly I feel privileged to have a garden to garden in myself, so that we don't have that barrier. But
there's something about building something and seeing the finished product. Frank Lloyd Wright, who I'm sure you've heard of, had all his apprentices work out in the garden or the fields for, I think it was 3 or 4 hours. Well, 3 hours a day, I think it was. And then they'd come into the studio and design with Frank Lloyd Wright. So that's how important he thought it was. It's important to
do the work yourself
and to know what end product you're making and how satisfying it is. So
and definitely that wasn't a barrier thinking like, oh, this isn't good enough. I did worry about that. I was nervous about like, oh, it's not good enough if it's on a smartphone. But I thought, what? I'm going to do it anyway.
If you have an eye, you have an eye.
Well, it looks great from my end. So kudos to you both. Now,
Thanks, Adele.
I know we're wrapping up. I just wanted to know what made you enter this film into the Garden State Film Festival, and what does it mean to be accepted?
Oh, I was so excited to be invited into the Garden State Film Festival, especially their 20th year anniversary.
Yes, I'm so excited.
And it's I have to say it's one of the more prestigious film festivals that I entered into, and so it was a huge honor to be part of Garden State Film Festival.
We found that out.
And we're just a mile away from Asbury Park Convention Hall, so we may bike or walk down to the film festival when it screens in March.
Oh, it's a wonderful film festival. Also, you should mention Jersey Friendly Yards. You have a connection with them, local Jersey group.
I'm super excited to just reach a wide audience because while in the Garden State, we've been focusing on environmental film festivals, but I know with Garden State Film Festival, I really want to reach people conventional gardeners who, through no fault of their own, because they just don't know about the importance of native plants, I just want to reach ordinary people and hopefully get them to consider planting native.
Yeah.
And Jersey Friendly Yards is a group that they helped out in the documentary. They were advisors, jerseyyards.org. So if anybody wants more information about gardening native in New Jersey, jerseyyards.org is a great place to go.
Well, we love it.
Yeah.
We're excited. We cannot wait. Really quickly, I just have to ask. I have a plant behind me, but it's not mine. It's my so,
it's doing well, right?
Thank you. I will tell her, plant in the background. But for those that do love gardening or maybe want to get their hands into it, what is just one quick tip or piece of advice you have for the beginners out there, such as myself?
Well, I think whenever you're going garden shopping, and it's really exciting that New Jersey just enacted a new law. It's the Jersey Plant Program. Right. So if you go to a store like a Home Depot or a Lowe's, you're going to see plants set aside saying these are native New Jersey plants. So I'm so excited that political change is happening so that people are steered towards native plants. So I have to say one thing, it's that just plant one plant, even just as an experiment, just plant one part of your yard and see what happens. You're going to attract, like we did.
And they're not.
You're going to attract.
And they're common plants. Like if you plant a St. John's wort or a New England aster, you'll get bees. If you plant a bee balm, you're going to get hummingbirds.
I guess the one message is.
You plant a Joe Plyweed, you get monarchs. You know, it's a miracle. And just start with one little plant. If every suburban yard had one native plant, just think of how easy it would be for the birds to migrate, to the ocean and then down to Cape May and down all the way to the Florida and the Caribbean,
So the one message I say is plant a native plant and the native bees and pollinators and birds will come.
It's a miracle. And it could be your miracle too.
I'm going to try. I can't promise, but I'm going to try now because
Yay!
You helped me out so much. Well, thank you guys so much for being here with us and talking. I'm so excited about the film. I know I've already been able to watch it, but for those of you who are excited to be at the 20th anniversary of the Garden State Film Festival, you can catch Wild in the Garden from 11:45 a.m. to 2 p.m. at the Berkeley Hotel Continental Ballroom on Saturday, March 26th. And we hope to see you guys there. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you so much, Adele.
Thank you, Adele.
Bye.